Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Here we are in 2016, and we have two potential people that are both vying for the same position in office of running the country as President of the United States. And with any particular campaign, one of the biggest talks that we always hear our potential presidents talking about is making sure that we've got a strong health care system that all Americans can feel confident about. Well, it's been decades, and still the talk keeps going on, and it seems like we see a system that's becoming more and more broken as more and more people become distressed and feel that they're being put on the outside with no hope in sight. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is someone who's served as the Executive Director of the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons since 1989. She'll be talking about what it would take to make American medicine great again. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Dr. Jane Orient. Dr. Orient, thank you for joining us here on the program.
Well, thank you for discussing this subject.
Well, this is one of those that, again, like I said, every time we have someone running for president, health care is always there, but it never really seems to get any better. It just seems to sort of like a hamster in a wheel.
Well, you're exactly right. We have had problems with the system for decades now. They have been getting steadily worse. They took a big leap toward getting worse with the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, which is in the process of self-destructing as insurance companies are bailing out because the promised profits they were supposed to get by forcing people to buy their product just haven't materialized. But patients are finding fewer and fewer choices. Their premiums are going up. And even though they now have high deductible policies, which used to be very reasonably priced, the premiums don't reflect that at all.
Now, it's interesting because I've been talking about this on the program for quite a bit. I think, first of all, if Americans could come to understand how to actually buy insurance, you don't buy it so you can go and get a checkup from the doctor. You buy it so if you have a major medical situation that occurs that stretches beyond your finances, then you have something in place, much like car insurance. And I think what bothered me, especially during the Obama administration, is they decided to pass a law to make it mandatory for everybody to have insurance. And I thought, this is ridiculous. They're making a law where private industry gets the benefit, and these guys are creating the rules even when you go in to see the doctor in the first place.
Well, that's true. And that car insurance or homeowners insurance might be a little bit costly, but it is affordable. It hasn't been going up. And your hope is that the premium that you pay is the only interaction you'll have with the insurance company. You don't want to get into a crash. You don't want your house to catch fire. And those are the only things you expect your insurance to pay for. And they paid for every little thing. You couldn't afford to have a car, and you might be living in a shack. But with health insurance, we've got something that is insurance in name only, but is really a way of funneling a huge amount of money through third parties who take a big chunk of it, maybe as much as half, and then they dole out checks to your doctor if and when they feel like it. They may make you feel good by paying for lots of little bills that you could have easily afforded to pay yourself. But if you need something important, well, then you'll find out just how stingy they are.
Well, that's true. I know I've certainly been on that particular end, even in my own family, where they decided, for instance, that one of the things was physical rehabilitation due to a particular accident that someone in my family was in, and they said, well, we're not going to pay for that. But you could see it was obviously something that needed to be done. And it seemed to have all these limitations about what they were willing to do. Okay, you've collected $300 to $400 a month in premiums. I could have probably afforded to pay for this myself by paying you guys. And now you're telling me with all that outlay that you're just not going to be covering this. And that those are the kind of things that just really leave you a little sour taste in your mouth.
Well, it is really a deeply held secret that they don't want you to find out about, that if you ask for the cash price for something, it may turn out to be less than your copay. For example, if you need an emergency head scan, you might have blood into your head or something like that, which is really important to find it out. They will delay. They will maybe by days because you have to have pre-authorization, and you'll still end up paying more for it, whereas if you had paid for it yourself out of pocket and not divulged that you had insurance, you could have had it almost immediately and at a much lower price.
Well, that's for sure. Doctors like cash. They don't like waiting for insurance payments.
Which often never come. The insurance companies are the biggest deadbeats in the world.
Isn't that a fact? Now, you talk about one of the root problems with the healthcare system is the tax code in Medicare. Go into detail what you mean there.
Well, the tax code back in World War II, as a consequence of price controls, gave immunity from taxes, both the payroll tax and the income taxes, for health insurance benefits that the employer bought. So employers who couldn't raise wages so that they could attract workers had these really generous health insurance plans, which were tax-free. Now, if you tried to buy the same insurance plan after taxes, these days, with taxes being what they are, especially the payroll tax, you would be paying almost twice as much for it. So it encouraged people to buy everything through a third party. They learned that nobody should have to pay their own medical bill. That's the insurance company's responsibility. Since they never see the money, they forget that they are earning that money. It belongs to them. And then they're locked into their job because if they lose their job, then they lose their insurance.
And how about Medicare?
Now, Medicare, that was a really deceitful product. Came in 1965, and they thought, well, we could sell this socialized medicine more easily just for the elderly than for the whole population. It wiped out other insurance because Lyndon Johnson jawboned the insurance companies into canceling the health insurance policies that a lot of seniors had and really liked, forced them into this government system, which was at first was a really good deal, but it is being paid for by the younger generation, by people who are still working. And while originally something like 16 workers were paying into Medicare for one retired person, now it's fewer than 3 workers are paying for one retired person. If you look at the guy who's pumping your gas, just how many old people's medical bills can he afford to pay?
That's true. Mm-hmm.
So Medicare, it had an immediate effect on prices. I'm told that hospital bills doubled just about overnight. And doctors who were taking care of the elderly before now got paid more for it. Or sometimes they instead of having to do it for charity, they got paid. They say, oh, well, isn't that a wonderful good deal?
Yeah, it's interesting because you talk about the benefits of stopping the plunder, if you will. An immediate 15% raise for all working people, a big increase in job opportunities, an enormous drop in the price of medical care, up to 50% or more, timely access to a doctor who is happy to see you and has plenty of time for you. You know, it really seems like, as I've talked about many times, see if you can find a way to advocate for your own health care and quit leaving it up to somebody else.
Well, that's exactly right. And the thing about the 15% wage increase, most people do not realize that 15% of their earnings is being taken from them by these Social Security and Medicare programs. They never see it. Now, the half of it that their employer supposedly pays, they have to earn also, because your employer is not going to hire you at a loss. You have to bring in enough value to the business to cover not only the paycheck you see, but all the expenses that you don't see. So if the employer and you did not have to pay that tax, which is the first dollar tax, you cannot earn $1 to buy milk for the baby or shoes for the baby without having 15% of it taken to pay for someone who is already retired. And they sold you the bill of goods that it's going to be there for you when you retire. But already the government is paying out more money than it's taking in. The program is effectively bankrupt, and it's just redeeming these special type of debt that they incurred, because back when the Social Security was running a surplus, government immediately spent it on something and stuffed the trust fund with IOUs.
Well, that was part of the reason for the Clinton administration showing a surplus, and the budget was just of that very thing, wasn't it?
I think that was getting close to the point where the amount of money coming in from the payroll tax was previously more than enough, but since that time it has become less than enough.
You know, it's just so interesting, especially when I think about the Social Security, for instance. Our Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, had said one time, that Americans aren't entitled to Social Security. And I thought to myself, well, that's interesting because we're paying for it. So how about if I go and take all the money out of your bank account because you're not entitled to that? That'd be an interesting argument.
Well, you are entitled to what's in your bank account because you earned it. You're not entitled to Social Security because it was just a tax, just a plain old tax. It was not a contribution to a pension fund, and the Supreme Court decided that early on, and that was the only reason why Social Security tax was considered constitutional, is because it's just a tax. It's just a tax. You have no right to it. The government can, and in some cases in the past it has, seized the person's right to Social Security on some pretext or other.
Mm-hmm. Now, what are some areas between hospitals and, let's say, insurance companies that you can see could be a real change in how we can actually reduce the cost, streamline it, improve the health care, and make everybody happy?
Well, the hospitals, of course, are very dependent on third-party payment, and I guess they were really behind the start of Blue Cross so they could get paid for the services. But at the present time, insurance has so distorted everything and added so much in administrative costs that nobody even knows for sure how much a simple service costs. How much of it is padded by what the third party has to take, how much is padded by the obligation to provide care for people who don't pay for it, or to provide care at less than cost for, like, Medicaid patients, to provide care for illegal aliens, and how much of it is just an outright scam. I mean, the hospitals have this thing called the charge master rate, which is ridiculously, outrageously high, so high that no one could possibly afford to pay for it out of pocket. But nobody, except for a few uninsured people, ever pays that cost. People go bankrupt paying that cost if they don't have insurance, but insurance companies pay a fraction of it, and the patient never knows how much the price really is if he had to pay for it himself.
Now, if we went the direction by abolishing this payroll tax, is that something that's easy for someone to do? How would we go about doing that?
Well, it would, of course, be very difficult because we have all of these seniors who are entitled to Social Security and Medicare. They have been promised that by the government, and they are dependent on it. There were people like my grandfather who knew that Social Security was never going to be all that great and that it would pay only a fraction of what you needed. But most people didn't really believe that. They felt the government was supposed to pay them what they really needed to live. And so these people would have to be paid in some way or other. But a lot of it, what is being used to pay for them now already comes out of general revenue. It does not just come out of the payroll tax. The payroll tax is not sufficient to cover it. And so I don't really think we can argue that it's fair for young working people who are struggling to pay their education debts, to get started in life, to raise a family, to start a business, should be the only ones responsible for paying for the care of the older generation. It seems that tax should be more equitably distributed across the whole population, and that we shouldn't have a tax punishing people for working, which is what we really need people to do.
Now I know that there are solutions out there. You're beginning to see quite a bit of it. I know that here in Oregon there was a particular doctor that started what is known as Zoom care, and there are clinics all throughout the Northwest, I guess. And It's just like what you're talking about, where there's a lot of transparency. You go in, you know what something's going to cost. In Florida, they're doing the same thing where they're actually posting, basically a menu of prices of particular things that you want to go in to have done. And it's sort of like the gas stations, right across the street it's 38 cents a gallon, and across the street from there it's 37 cents. But you're beginning to see, for instance, the medical system, if you will, in some ways actually becoming proactive because they're just as fed up as the people are.
Yes, and this is a very good movement. There is an ambulatory surgery center in Oklahoma, surgerycenterok.com, that did a really revolutionary thing. It started posting its price, its full price that included the anesthesia, the surgeon, and the facility on the Internet. You can go there and click on the part of your body that's involved, click on the procedure, and find out what that is going to cost you. And you will also find out that it may be a tenth as much as your local hospital is going to charge. And there have been cases of examples of patients who looked at this and went into their local hospital and said, well, I can get my prostate fixed in Oklahoma City for this amount, and you're going to charge me 10 times as much. What can you do about it? And it turns out that the hospital decided, well, their surgery would cost as much as the Surgery Center OK price plus the price of a plane ticket. So, competition does work.
That's for sure. Now, what are some other solutions that you know of that we can begin to pursue?
I think maybe honesty, of course, is the most important thing, that we really need to have hospital bills that people can understand. And I think maybe it would be a good thing to express the bill in terms of months of insurance premium, as people don't understand how much they're paying for insurance. By the way, your bill for your homeowner's insurance or your automobile insurance may be a yearly fee, or maybe maybe you pay it twice a year, but your health insurance you pay every month, and people don't feel like multiplying by 12, because if they did, they would be absolutely astonished. I mean, a lot of people are paying more than $10,000 or $12,000 a year for their health insurance. So you could have an operation for the cost of your insurance, but then you have had, your treatment, the money that you give to the insurance company is gone forever. If you need your operation one day after your insurance policy has expired, you're totally out of luck, absolutely totally out of luck.
Now, what about restructuring insurance itself to reflect what it really was originally intended for instead of the way that people tend to look at it? It's just interesting how there was a particular time a friend of mine, he was involved in a new way of looking at health care that basically does what insurance does. They advertise hospitals and healthcare providers, and then, the people, they go to these providers. But in this particular case, it was something like $69 a month, and it covers the family. And basically what you're looking at is healthcare cost at reduced prices because of this particular program. Now, unlike insurance, it didn't pay for anything. It just paid for you to have access to the healthcare providers that would provide these services at reduced rates. Now, what was interesting is I would go out with him from time to time and watch him talk to people, and you would see the same kind of reactions over and over and over again. Now, these were people who had no health care, okay? So their first concern was, well, what if something happens? And I'm thinking to myself, but you don't seem concerned about that because you don't have any health care in the first place. But the fact is they really just didn't understand how it all works. And I believe that a lot of times a system like this is that way just for that very reason, to keep you ignorant, to keep you, in fear, so you'll just willingly surrender the money, not knowing really how much of this money you're surrendering is going to have a benefit to you.
Oh, I think that's exactly right, that fear plays a big price in it, a big role in it. And if you have these outrageous hospital bills out there, people are terrified. On the other hand, if there were transparent pricing where you could find out what something really costs, then you might say, hey, it is so expensive to buy this insurance. If I saved a year's worth of premiums in my bank account, I could pay for this myself. And if I had something happen immediately, I could borrow money to pay for it, and the interest on my debt would be less than the extra amount I have to pay to the insurance company.
Now, what are some other solutions that aren't generally known of or out there that you're taking a look or that you're aware of that people are really trying to put into action?
One of the best ones, I think, now are these Christian health-sharing ministries, and there are health-sharing ministries now like Liberty Health Share that are not just for Christians, but they're not insurance, but they are a way of voluntarily sharing each other's medical bills. I belong to Samaritan Ministries, and every month I write a check to a person who's had a bill. The ministries tells me, who it is and what the problem was, and I write a check for something like $200. And then, should I have a need, then they will ask people to chip in to pay me, and then I would be obligated to pay the doctors and the hospitals and other people who took care of me. So it's a person-to-person sharing. It costs maybe a tenth or a half, anyway, much, much less than it would cost me to have a regular plan called insurance. Of course, you do have to pay some routine expenses out of pocket, but anything that is substantial, you can share with your neighbors who voluntarily agree to do this for you.
Well, and that's where it goes to, as I've suggested to people, what you want to look for. Generally, these policies aren't really that expensive. They're fairly affordable, which is the catastrophic health insurance. You pay a premium. I think there was one gentleman I came across, he was paying $40 a month. He was in his 60s. And he says, but I've got a $5,000 deductible, but once that's paid, then they pay everything at 100%. Now, people would wonder, well, what if I want to go see the doctor, in case I have an ear infection? Well, that's not what this is for. I don't think you're going to pay $5,000 to go see a doctor to find out whether or not you have an ear infection, although something comically, on the side note there, I remember going to a doctor one time, telling him I had an ear infection. He looked in my ear and he says, you've got an ear infection. Here's a prescription, and they charged me $300 for the visit. And I'm thinking to myself, the only reason I'm there is so I can get something to help with this. So from that point forward, I tried finding alternative ways in case that happened again that I can actually avoid seeing the doctor, which, interestingly enough, there's a lot of great ways to, I guess, resolve an ear infection without paying $300. But, it's just interesting when you look at it that way and you kind of go, well, what do we do in the meantime, But the catastrophic, that was something I could afford to pay for. But, let's say that you go out and, break a leg or something like that. That can get pretty spendy, especially with rehabilitation. That's what these policies are for. But in the meantime, you can afford to go and see a doctor and pay him directly face-to-face. If you got a cold or the flu, whatever the case is, something like that, or just going in for a physical. These are all things most people can really afford to go do.
Well, especially if they're not having to pay an army of clerks and insurance executives and other people to oversee what they're getting. Now, when I had my appendix out, the hospital bill was $150. At the time, that was 10 days' pay for a construction laborer without any special skills. Today, some time ago, a friend of mine had the very same operation, and his hospital bill was $3,000. And they still do it the same way that they used to.
Yeah, removing appendix hasn't changed all that much, has it?
But there's just all of these things added on that do not add benefit to the patient, and the patient, if he knew about it, would choose to just do without it. Do I need a lady with a clipboard checking to see how I'm doing, or whether my doctor checked in a certain box on the form? I can say, well, never mind. I'd rather not pay for that.
Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with the movie The Rainmaker?
No.
Okay. It's a Matt Damon movie, part of his earlier thing. And what he is, he's a young, idealistic lawyer, just fresh out of law school. And apparently there was this young man, he had paid for a health care policy that would guarantee treatment for leukemia that he had. That's what this was sold to him as. Then they decided, well, we're going to bulk on this. I know you've been paying your premiums on time and so forth, but we're just not going to pay for any of these procedures. And so apparently, this insurance company in this fictional story was like one of the largest in the world. And so what happens is eventually this young man dies because he's not getting any treatment that he was guaranteed through this insurance policy. And so they go to trial, and you discover that there's all these layers and inner departments that, as one of the people in the movie said, are kept at war with each other. And they basically deny you. The idea is to initially deny all claims. Doesn't matter who they're coming from. They all get denied. And so this mother of this young man, she kept coming back at him, and so I guess she inquired about 8 or 9 times. What's up here? You're supposed to be paying this, and then finally, you basically wrote us 8 times, and for the 8th time we're telling you, no, we're not paying nothing. You must be an idiot. That sort of a thing. And you realize, okay, you're paying this kind of money, and in some cases, as you were saying, up to $10,000 a year in premiums, just to pay all these people to be at war with each other who are going to deny you more or less in the first place, alleged. Why would you pay for a system like that, especially at $10,000 a year?
Well, if you understood it, you wouldn't. And one of the things that places like Surgery Center of Oklahoma are doing is showing people that it's not theoretical that we can offer excellent care at a much lower price. We are doing it. We're not just guessing that at least 50% of your medical dollar is going down the drain. Here's the evidence. We can do it for that much less.
I'll tell you an interesting experience that I had about 10 years ago. One of the biggest farces I think that are out there is dental insurance. And I kept asking dentists, what is a good dental health plan? He says, they just don't exist anymore. They don't. He says, generally, you can just come into a dental office, if it's one close to your home. Go ahead and plop down, maybe $200, whatever the case may be, and get something started with us. Make sure that you make your payments when you come in, or you can actually, just deposit into this, account that we have open for you. And it was tremendous. So I decided to go this direction. I started going to see the dentist, and I was amazed at how affordable going in and having dental care really was. There were times he'd come in, this is your 5th visit, so I'll tell you what, next time you come in, I'm going to throw a free cleaning on the house. But there were all these things, and I was realizing, wow, and not only that, but they were responsive. I felt like I was being very well taken care of, and I felt more confident with that because of the relationship than I ever would have having a dental insurance and saying I need to go in and have a teeth cleaning, which most people could afford to do, again, being proactive. So it's really funny, as you said, when you understand the system, well, you wouldn't want to buy into it.
Yes, people are able to figure things out. There are all kinds of good ideas out there. There's some doctors have a subscription practice where you can come in whenever you need to. You can get their cell phone number. They even make house calls sometimes. Maybe they'll dispense drugs for you. You get a really good deal on laboratory tests. All of these things can be done, and they are being done. But, of course, the big guys who are profiting from all these insurance scams are trying to stop them. And, of course, with Obamacare, these plans don't qualify to meet the insurance mandate, and so the IRS is going to charge you if you're taking care of yourself. There's one beautiful thing about the Affordable Care Act is it does exempt these health-sharing ministries from the penalty. So if you get you provide for your medical care that way, they can't fine you when tax time comes around.
Now, as we got about a minute or two here, it sounds like, though, Obamacare might be repealed. Is that a possibility you've heard about?
Well, I guess it's been repealed time after time after time. The president vetoed it, and now the Republicans are talking about replacing it, and some of their ideas for replacing it are also very bad. So I don't know what's going to happen. The problem is that once something like this gets started, and it's implemented a little bit at a time, so a lot of people are dependent on it, or they're making money from it, and some people really like it because they're getting taxpayer subsidies. It's really hard to take it away from them. And it's even harder to take it away from the people who are scamming and gaming the system than from the few poor people that it really is helping.
Understood. It's been a real pleasure to have you here on the program, and this is always a hot topic with a lot to talk about. Is there a website that people could go to, or how they can go about researching and beginning to learn a lot more about this rather than standing by and listening to everybody else tell them the way it works?
They can go to aapsonline.org. That's the website of the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons. There's a patient tab on there where there are lists of cash-friendly doctors that are willing to see you without asking about your insurance in different states. There's all kinds of advice for people who don't have insurance, how to get medical care in a very affordable way. We have a new book out called Common Sense Medicine that is, I think it's available on the website. It's very, very inexpensive. You can sign up for our alerts for free, find out what new things are about to happen.
Very good. Well, Dr. Oriat, thank you so much for joining us here on the program today. Again, like I said, this is always one of those hot topics, but I think it would be hotter if people would awaken and understand it better than they do.
And thank you so much for helping them do that.
You bet. I appreciate having you here on the program today. We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. You can also discover more by visiting us at Beyond50Radio.com. That is the number 50. Find out what we're up to and what's coming up on the Beyond 50 Radio program. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Beyond 50 Radio. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 Radio program. And remember, live your day past halfway.